And today we're moving to the story of Abraham. We're going to spend a few weeks talking about Abraham, but I thought, now some of you this will be review, but I'm a very selfish person, so I thought I'd talk a little bit about me this morning. So that'll make some people happy, it'll make some people sad, as long as I can figure out how to get out of wherever I am. I was born at a young age. Oh, there we are. I was born in a place called Newmarket, Ontario, just outside Toronto. You have to understand when you're from that part of the world that everything's pretty close to you and you don't have to move very much. By the way, Connor McDavid's from Newmarket, so I have some, famous relatives. Just kidding, no. Just say no. But I grew up in the Toronto area, and we realized fairly quickly that there's something wrong with me. I have severe asthma and severe allergies, and I wasn't doing very well. So when I was, I don't know how old, the doctor gave my parents some bad news. It didn't look like I was going to live to be a teenager. Now, this has a happy ending. I'm still here. I wasn't going to make it probably much past 10, 11 because of the breathing and allergy problems, unless there was a severe change in lifestyle. And one of the severe changes was that we had to move. We couldn't live in the Toronto area. Doctor gave us choice of two places we could move to. One was Phoenix, Arizona. He was a little afraid that would probably aggravate my eczema, so wasn't sure about that one. And the other place was a place I know that you just don't like to talk about, Calgary, Alberta. So just get over it. It's okay. So when I was 8 years old, my mom and I went on a train trip from Toronto to Calgary. We actually came through Edmonton. My mom loved Edmonton. She phoned back to the doctor and said, "Can we move to Edmonton instead of Calgary?" And the doctor said, "No, it's got to be Calgary." I said, "Okay." So we came out actually for a month to stay with some friends in Calgary. And there's a couple of things I remember about that stay. Obviously, it was February. I was out of school, so about this time of year, we were here. I got a package from my classmates. I was in grade 2, so I got a package from my classmates back in Ontario. A bunch of homemade cards, we miss you, stuff like that, whether they meant it or not, But the common theme of most of these cards was, have you seen any cowboys and Indians? Because when you live in Toronto, you think that that's all there is in Alberta. Now, I recognize Indians is not a politically correct way of saying it, but this was 1968, and political correctness hadn't got into my grade 2 class yet. So they were calling them Indians. Hope you'll forgive me. But yeah, I answered these cards. It was one of my kind of educational opportunities that I had to do when we were here. And the other thing I remember about my stay in Calgary that February was one night, Mom was out. She must have been out with some ladies. There was nobody left in the house, big house, with just me and this guy that I didn't know, the husband of the lady we were staying with. And we were just alone in the house, two of us. And I don't know whether you've ever been to Calgary, but it can get windy down there. And the wind just kind of whips through. And we were kind of out on the edge of town. At least in 1968, it was the edge of town. It's no longer the edge of town anymore. And the wind was just whipping through. And it was making some really strange noises. And so I don't know whether this guy thought that I was scared or something. I thought people were trying to attack the house, but he said, "Oh, it's okay, we're safe." And then he went to an unlocked cupboard. Again, this is 1968, so give me a break. He went to an unlocked cupboard and he took out a gun. We're safe because I've got a gun. And I went, "Oh, that's kind of 8 years old. What do you know?" The gun was loaded. And I found that out because it accidentally went off. Caught me in the shoulder. No, it didn't. It didn't come near me. We were looking at this gun, and all of a sudden the gun goes off. And it fired into kind of that, like it was perfect. It was right kind of at the connection where the linoleum of the kitchen meets the cupboards, you know. It was like right there. You had to really get down on your hands and knees to see where the bullet put the hole in. And we both did exactly that. We got down and we, you know, fingered that little bullet hole. And then he cautioned me that I could never tell his wife what had happened. And I didn't tell the story until after she had passed away. So I think I'm okay with this. I never told his wife what happened. That's terrible. Thank you, Danielle. And then we took the train back home again after a month in Calgary. I went back to grade 2, finished off my grade 2 year, and then at the end of June, when everything was finished, my parents made a move. We moved from Newmarket, just outside Toronto, to Calgary. Bought a house. And looking back on it, you know, I look at my parents and I'm just kind of in awe. I mean, they were barely out of their childhood themselves. They would have been in their late 20s, which is fairly young. And they were moving from a place where we had family basically within half an hour in any direction. There was family, there was, you know, grandparents, aunts and uncles. They were right there, just in this little, you know, circumference of area. You didn't have to go very far to find them. And we moved from there to a place where the nearest relative was 3,000 kilometers away. To my parents' credit, they never really blamed me for having to make this move. My dad today says it was the best thing they ever did, so they're still not blaming me yet. Maybe when they get old and, you know. But I know how much family means to me. It's good to have, you know, my kids and my grandkids living basically within 5 minutes of here. It's great to know that my parents are just down the number 2 raceway to Calgary. My sister's in Calgary. My grandmother is in Claresholm. We're all kind of in Alberta. But I still have a lot of relatives that are in Ontario. And it's just kind of, but trying to get my head around that as an adult, understanding all of this, and knowing that you have to move somewhere. It can be frightening. I'm not sure what that would feel like as a kid. As a 20-something-year-old couple, just trying to get marriage and parenthood down and know that all of your help is somewhere else. When we start off the story of Abram, it starts off with this comment. The Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, your father's household to a land I will show you." Abram, here's what I want you to do. I want you to pack up and go to a place that I will tell you when you get there. Because I told you to go. And again, it's putting myself in Abram's place. I'm going, wow, that's a huge ask. That's leave. I mean, there's no cars, there's no planes. So they're leaving where they have lived and are going to move 1,000 kilometers away from there. And they're likely never going to see their family ever again. Wow. And God hasn't even told them where. He said, just, take your first right and go that way. I'll tell you when to turn. You'll get there. So Abram, Sarah, they pack up. They've got no children. So they take Lot, the nephew of Abram, and they start to go towards wherever God is taking them. The only difference is that my parents were in their late 20s when they made the move. Abram was 75. And God says, you know what? I am going to promise you. I'm going to promise you some things. Here it is. This is the next verses in Genesis 12. God says this: I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Here's the promise. You're going to move, but I'm going to bless you, and I'm going to bless those who bless you. Now go. And to his credit, Abraham left, and he went. He believed God, and he started his journey, confident that God would tell him when to stop, when he had arrived at whatever the place was that God wanted him to be. And his faith carried him there. I want to pick up the story in Genesis 15. The promise is what we just read in Genesis 12. The execution of the promise doesn't happen until Genesis 15. And here's how the writer of Genesis phrases it. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless? And the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus. And Abraham said, You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. Then the word of the Lord came to him. This man will not be your heir, but a son, who is your own flesh and blood, will be your heir. He took him outside and said, Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, So shall your offspring be. Abraham believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. So we have the promise, we have the command to move, the promise, and now we've got another comment from God. And at every step, we have this comment. Abraham believed. First thing I want you to note is that the promise is conditional. Now, for all the Bible scholars out there, I know I'm in trouble already because I'm going to explain what I mean by conditional, and I'll explain a little bit more later in the sermon. But just stay with me for now. The promise is conditional. It's conditional on belief. Abraham believed. If Abraham didn't believe God and didn't leave where his parents were in Ur of the Chaldeans, none of this would have happened. He could have stayed home. He said, God, sounds like a nice opportunity, but I don't think it's for me right now. I'm 75 years old with a wife, and I think I'm going to stay here. But that's not what Abram did. He believed. When God gave him the promise of, you will be blessed, and everyone who blesses you will be blessed, Abram took that in stride. He believed. And now he's having this conversation with God, and God's saying, I'm going to bless you. And Abram's getting a little bit old, and he's going, well, God, that's nice and everything, but I got no kids. I'm not going to be here for that much longer to enjoy your blessings. It would have been nice if I could have passed on your blessings to a child, but I don't have a child. everything that you give me is just going to go to Eliezer of Damascus? I mean, what? And God says, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm telling you that this blessing will be on you and on your descendants. And then he tells him to go outside. And he says, count the stars. Now, if you go outside in Edmonton, you might actually be able to count the stars. Sometimes it's just hard to see a star up there. There's 7. There's right. Yeah. This is the number of your descendants, Abram. 7. But if you go outside of Edmonton and look up, you have a sky filled with stars. You can't count them. You wouldn't know where to start. And God says, this is how many descendants you are going to have. And Abram, long past the childbearing years, believes. He just simply says, okay, God, if this is what you say, I believe you. The promise depended on Abram's belief. When I look around at the church, the contemporary church that we are part of, I often come back to the exact same question. What is it that you believe? We know for a fact, there have been studies on the fact that belief influences our lives. Pain can be, I'm not saying it always is, but it can be a result of belief. At the Ash Wednesday service this week, I told a story about having to go to the dentist. I broke a tooth just before Christmas. So it's taken me 3 visits back to the dentist to try to get the tooth fixed. And so, the first one was, well, we'll give you something temporary. The second one was, well, we're going to dig it out and give you something temporary. And then this last one was supposed to be more permanent. And they told me at the second one that the last one's not painful. There's no pain there. Now, don't have a healthy relationship with dentists. I just don't. So when it came for my visit, and I admitted this on Wednesday, I'm a bad boy. I understand that. I often take some Tylenol before I go to the dentist because I know it's going to hurt. And so as I went to the dentist this week, I'm going, this is a non-painful time, so do I really need to take the Tylenol? And I decided, yeah, I do. I took the Tylenol, and I went, and I sat in the chair. And again, they told me this should be painless. It's no problem. And then they started to work on the tooth, and I just went through the roof. Now, I get it. Maybe I was expecting pain, so I got pain. And we know that's true. If you go into something looking for pain, you can find pain. So I'm not saying that this was not a painless thing, that I was looking for pain. And my mind said, well, if you're looking for pain, I'm going to give you pain. But sometimes we need to be careful what we believe. What do you expect when you come into the house of the Lord? What do you believe is going to happen here? If you believe you're going to be bored, you'll be bored. If you believe this is a waste of time, it'll be a waste of time. If you believe God is going to meet you here, God will meet you here. If you believe that God has a purpose for you and that somehow his purpose will be fulfilled within the community of God, you will become closer to that purpose that God has for his people. It all starts with what we believe. Whether like Abram, we can say, okay, I believe. I don't understand any of this. But I'm willing to say, God, that I believe in you. And my belief is strong enough that I will put what I believe into action. So when Abram was at home in Ur, and God came to him and said, I want you to go to a place I will show you. Abram could have said, I believe you, and not done a thing. Or he could say, I believe you, and because I believe you, I'm going to put what I believe into action, and I'm going to pack up my family, and I'm going to pack up my wife, and I'm going to get my nephew, and we are going to start the journey that you were calling us on. There are two ways of believing. James says this, you believe that there is one God? Good. Even demons believe that and shudder. What's the difference? A demon believes that there's one God, but a demon is not willing to put into practice what that one God wants of it. It is opposing the will of God. And therefore, it believes in God and shudders. And sometimes we can be the same thing. What do you believe? How will that cover what is going to happen? And it was something that Jesus understood as well. He understood that belief has a lot to do with what happens in our day-to-day lives. Consider this story from a visit of his home to Nazareth. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. Where did this man get these things, they asked. What's this wisdom that has been given him? What are these remarkable miracles he is performing? Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. And Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his own town, among his relatives, and in his own home. And he could not do any miracles there except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them. And he was amazed at their lack of faith. They didn't believe, and because they didn't believe, Jesus was handicapped as to what he could do in their midst. Sometimes when I look again at the contemporary church, I'm going, have we just simply gotten to the point where we no longer believe, and therefore God can no longer move in our midst? Continue on with our passage in Genesis 15. God also said to Abram, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to take possession of it. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession of it? Good question. God, how can I know? So the Lord said to him, bring me a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. Abram brought all these to him, cut them in two, and arranged the halves opposite each other. The birds, however, he did not cut in half. Then the birds of prey came down on the carcass, but Abram drove them away. As the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated there. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. You, however, will go to your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good old age. In the 4th generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. The next blank is just simply the promise is sure. I'm going to go out on a limb and tell you what I think. I told my board I wouldn't do this anymore, but oh well. Hopefully they'll forgive me or fire me. We'll find out what happens. On Friday, we celebrated a horrible anniversary. 1 year of the Russia invasion of Ukraine. And over this past, month maybe, I seem to have had more conversations with people that start off with, can you believe all the money that we're spending in Ukraine? Why are we spending all this money for something that is, half a world away? And my response to them has been, so far, I understand, but what's the alternative? And so far, nobody's come up with an alternative yet. I'm kind of, in some ways, disheartened by that because I'd like to see an alternative, but nobody's come up with anything yet. I have admitted that I am a bit of a reluctant pacifist. I believe in peace. I believe in finding nonviolent ways of doing things. But there are some times in this broken world where I just can't figure out what else we could do. And I must admit that the Ukraine is one of these things where I'm dying to know what the alternative is. But so far, no alternative has placed itself out. On February 24th, 2022, at 5 o'clock in the morning, Putin declared war on the Ukraine. 5 in the morning, local time. Most of Ukraine was still asleep. And within minutes, Russia had started firing missiles at Ukraine. The hope from their side was that this war would be over before it started. That Russia would be able to just come in and take Ukraine, and by sundown, everything would be back to peace because there would be no more Ukraine. It would just be a bigger Russia. That didn't happen. Russia sold a story that Ukrainians were really just Russians, and that the Ukrainian government was a foreign government who was putting a will on Ukrainians that the Ukrainians did not want. Again, that proved to be false. A man that we, before this happened, probably didn't know much about, Volodymyr Zelensky, has not just proven himself as a president of the Ukraine, but he's become a world leader because of how he's handling this. And I get that it's expensive, but what's the alternative? I also try to remind people that they're not actually getting a whole lot of money from us. A lot of what we see in these billions of dollars that are being trucked that way are in old weapons. They're not the new stuff. They're the stuff that needs to be replaced. Kind of like, when you've got a couch you don't want in your house, so you bring it to the church to put in the youth room. It's that kind of thing, or sit it by the dumpster out here so that I have to call up Stan and say, Stan, can you take the couch to the dump? That's kind of what we're doing. We're just giving them this old stuff, easy stuff to use. Hopefully we'll get the job done. But what's the alternative? And not only what's the alternative, but we have been here before. A little bit before my time, a guy named Adolf Hitler did some things in Germany. Get in trouble for saying this, but he tried to lift a load that had been placed on Germany after World War I off of his country. But in the process, he started to talk about regaining German land. And we sat and watched this happen. And in 1939, he said, I'm just going to take part of Czechoslovakia, the Sudeland, that is actually German. So I'm just going to go in, take that portion of land, and then that'll be it. And so that's exactly what Germany did. They went in, they took that land, had a lot of bases on it, some missile silos. And then on March 15th, Germany went in and took the rest of Czechoslovakia. And the world watched it happen. On March 31st, 1939, Britain, upset that Germany had gone against their promise and had taken the rest of Czechoslovakia, had a meeting with Poland and said, if Germany turns its eyes on you, we will defend you. On September 1st, 1939, Germany entered Poland. On September 3rd, 1939, Britain declared war on Germany, and the Second World War had started. We've watched this movie before. Right now, as Ukraine is fighting for their life, the leaders of both Moldova and Poland are sure that if Ukraine falls, they're next. So what's the alternative? Having said all that, though, I have a bigger beef about Ukraine. In 1991, when the unthinkable happened and the Iron Curtain fell and the Soviet Union released its satellite states so they could become states on their own, the world's superpowers, as far as nuclear arms were concerned, there was 3 of them. The United States was number 1. Russia was number 2. Ukraine was number 3. At the time, the United States and Russia were trying to cut down on nuclear arms that had, grown so much that we could destroy the earth many, many, many times over. They wanted to lessen the destruction capability. And so in 1994, they had a meeting with Ukraine, and their request was, Ukraine, we would like you to disarm all of your nuclear weapons. We would like you to become a non-nuclear nation. And Ukraine asked a question that's pretty close to what Abram is asking in our passage. How can we know? How can we know that we're not going to need those weapons? What do we do? With those weapons, maybe people won't attack us, but if we lose those weapons, then are we ripe for another conqueror to come in and take us? How can we be sure? And Russia and the United States in this meeting said this: you can be sure that no one's going to attack you, because if anybody does, we, Russia and the United States, will fight for you. And now here we are, many years later. And one of the ones that said they would guarantee the safety of Ukraine is the one who is attacking. And the other one is giving some weapons, but I wouldn't say even the United States or anybody else has really stood up and said, we will defend you. Because they're scared of what that would look like. And I get that. So for everybody who says we shouldn't send any more weapons to Ukraine, I just keep on asking the question, what is the alternative? Abram asked God, how can I be sure? And God says, listen, I want you to kill some animals, to cut them in two with a path in between them. And I'm going to tell you something. And it's not something that you're going to want to know, I don't think. A time is coming when your descendants, he doesn't even have a child yet. There's time is coming when your descendants are going to go into slavery. I know. You don't want to hear that. These are your children. They will go into slavery and they will live in a land that is not theirs for 400 years. But I'm telling you this because I promise I will be with you. And I promise I will be with them. And when they leave this country where they have been a slave, they will be a nation. And I will make sure that they leave with the things that they will need to start out new life. And they will be my people. and I will be their God. Abram, you can be sure because I am telling you that everything's not going to be great, but it will happen. And Abram, I have never gone back on my word with you before. Every time I said something to you, you have done it. You believed. I'm just asking you to believe one more time. When the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a smoking fire pot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, "To your descendants I give this land, from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Kadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites." The promise is cumulative. I give you, Abram, this land. Now, scholars want us to know that this is an unconditional, even though I said it was conditional, an unconditional promise. Because normally, what you would do is you would cut these animals up and you would place them kind of like where our chairs are. And then the two people making the covenant with each other would walk together down the path. In this passage, they didn't do that. We see this flaming pot walking down the path, which is to signify the presence of God, making a promise with Abram. But I disagree because I think so far Abram's done a lot of the heavy lifting. He's done a lot of the believing already. And God is just saying, listen, I know that you believe. And because of that, I feel that I can make this covenant with you. So last week we talked about Noah, all the water. I confused you with a story that you didn't know. The ultimate promise from Noah is this. God promises, regardless of the situation, that he will not destroy the world with a flood again. This is the promise. I'm not going to destroy the world. It's kind of a negative promise. I'm not going to destroy you. The Abram covenant is not about destruction. It says, I will bless you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples on the earth will be blessed through you. We take these two promises, and they kind of form one big promise. I'm not going to destroy you, but I'm going to bless you. And we can't miss that the promise is for the world. God's intention is, Abram, I'm going to bless you so that you can bless everybody else. I'm going to bless you so that you can share that blessing. You're going to share it with your descendants, but you're going to share it with your neighbors. You're going to share it with your enemies. You're going to share this blessing because this is how I will bless the world, is through you. And Israel has struggled with that, with understanding that simple idea that the world should have been blessed because they are in it. Can I just make this statement? God has blessed his church, not so that we would become some sort of holy, sacred club, but so that we would be the presence of God in this world. When we say, God, I believe you. I believe in everything that you want. I want to be part of that process. We're falling right into the blessing. He will bless us so that we can bless them. We're not supposed to hoard it for ourselves. God said he's not going to destroy the world, but that he's going to bless the world, and his And his means of blessing the world is his church. Just as it was Israel. And still remains to be Israel. I think that still is going to come up in the next few years where we're going to see Israel become more of a blessing for the world. But we can't look at Israel and say, well, they didn't do it. We have to look at ourselves and say, God is asking us to be a blessing. He would bless us so we would bless the world. And as a way of making that sure, God moved between the dead animals. A smoking firepot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. And on that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham. And we go back to 15:6. Abraham believed the Lord, and it was credited to him as righteousness. We can't get away from that. We started there and we can't get away from that. What do we believe? Do we believe that God can change the world? When I asked what the alternative was for Ukraine, somebody put their hand and went like this, and I'm going, yeah, exactly. Heaven, God, Christ. Are we in prayer? That God would do something? That there would be a miracle in our midst? Do we believe enough for that? Because if we don't believe, then there's no power. Even Jesus couldn't do the miracles in Nazareth because the people had no faith. What? God? Are we asking the question about what we should be praying as we love Ukraine? Are we donating our money to peaceful things like rebuilding the homes of the people whose lives have been destroyed? Sending ambulances that can somehow gather in the sick and the dying from the blast and get them someplace where they can be healed. There's lots of things the church could be doing if we wanted to. But it starts off with whether or not we believe that God can do it. I want you to know right now that I believe. I believe that God has a purpose for this small church right here. I believe that he's in control. I believe that God has a purpose for you. Every single one of you. And sometimes you are critical about yourselves, and you needn't be. Because God loves you. And he wants you to be part of his story. But the first thing we have to do, just like Abraham, is say, okay, God, I believe, and I believe enough to put my belief into action. God, I expect you to show up in my life. I expect you to show up in my church. I expect you to use me in some way to bring your blessing to a world that needs you. I don't know how it's going to work, but I believe. I believe that you will take me to that point, and I will follow you. And where you tell me to turn right, I will turn right. And where you tell me to turn left, I'll turn left. And when you tell me to stop, I'll realize we have arrived. But it starts off with just simply believing that God can do it. It's a question that I just want to leave with you this morning. What do you believe? Let's pray. Father, I thank you for each of these, my friends, that you have placed in this building in a circle of acquaintance, that we can love each other, that we can enjoy each other's company. But God, so much more, I believe that you are blessing us so that we can bless this community. Help us to see how we can do that. Help us to understand how we can put our belief into action. God, we believe in you. In the big things like the Ukraine-Russia war, and the little things like what's happening on 132nd. We believe. We believe that you have a purpose for us. And God, we want to be at the center of that purpose. We understand, just like Abram, that may not be a peaceful place to be. But we just want to be at the center of who you are, the center of what you are doing right here in Edmonton. Father, bless us so that we can bless them. Help us. Enlarge our influence so that we can be the blessing that you need us to be. And help us not to cause harm or fear to those who are around us. In all these things, Lord, we believe. And we pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen.